So if you had at some point the inspiration to start a side hustle and you're passionate about it, then try as much as you can to just stick with that moment. Like, remember that moment and let that be the motivator for you, instead of letting, the doubt's going to happen. I mean, we all have that. Oh, is this worth it? Is this such a risk? And, I messed up. Like, you're going to make mistakes every day. You're going to learn a million things every day. But I would say that no one will ever regret following their gut and listening to their intuition. And I truly believe that.
Welcome to Side Hustle Hero, the show that is laser focused to inspire you to take action to start or to scale your side hustle income streams. I'm your host, Joan Posivy, author of The Way Success Works, How to Decide, Believe, and Begin to Live Your Best Life. Starting or scaling your side hustle can be a stressful experience, right? That's why I'm thrilled to have a conversation with Nicole Porter, someone who has not only proven that she can start, grow, and scale a successful side hustle, but she's also an award-winning stress coach. So today, I tap into her depth of knowledge in both these areas. She is also a nutritionist, wellness educator, creator of the Hidden Stress Framework, and she can make a kick-ass batch of eggnog. Yeah, you'll hear about that too. Be sure to catch the wrap-up at the end of the show for a highlight of 3 key takeaways, one of which I guarantee is a factor in your stress level. And I'll give you a tip that'll help you instantly improve how you feel the next time you do feel stressed. Here now is my conversation with Nicole Porter. Welcome, Nicole. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Joan. I'm excited to be here.
So what were you doing for your full-time 9-to-5 before you even started thinking about launching a side hustle?
My quote unquote 9-to-5, even though it probably wasn't really only 9-to-5, but it was selling advertising. So I was selling radio advertising at the time, and I loved it. I was really passionate about marketing and advertising, and I had worked for other companies selling advertising, but I had just gotten to a point where I needed something more and something more fulfilling, and probably have a little bit of it in my DNA to go out and start my own business.
Especially if you're effective at that sales and marketing side, that would obviously serve you well going forward.
Absolutely. You certainly, I mean, I have no regrets about the career path that I took, because if anything, learning how to sell thickened my skin, right? I mean, you need to be able to hear a bunch of no's, and you need to know that's the process until you get to a yes or multiple yeses. So I never thought I would be in sales, actually. I thought I would probably work for an ad agency or something like that. But then at one point in my career, a friend had recommended that I get into selling advertising, and I'm so glad I did.
That is a great job for a young person to get involved in, just to pick up that skill as you just described it.
100%.
And it's been said that nothing happens until someone sells something.
Yeah, true.
So there's always going to be a market for a salesperson.
For sure.
You need all the other departments, for sure.
Exactly.
Production and accounting, etc.
Exactly.
So what caused you to think about starting a side hustle?
So I'd worked in radio for probably 8 or so years. And actually, even before I officially started this one particular side hustle, I had gone out on my own with a partner for a very brief period. And then I got back into radio again. So that very first time was a shock to my system, because, I realized, oh no, I've got to pay for my own, my paper, my phone, my everything. And it's that added stress of, oh, I've got to pay for it. Because I was never one, I shouldn't say never, but I just I love that quote, leap and the net will appear. So it was more, I just jumped and left and went out to start my own thing. And that was with a partner. And he and I were on enough of a different page or different pages for me to consider going back into radio. So then I went back into radio for another 4 years. And towards the end of that, it was just getting a bit stagnant. I felt like I wasn't challenged anymore. And my passion really started to move towards, or more aggressively move towards, because I was always passionate about TV. I love TV and film and entertainment and whatnot. But I wanted to get into product placement, which was placing brands into entertainment platforms like TV, film, eventually video games, and anywhere else you might see a brand. And so working at a radio station, I couldn't do that. And
Right.
the company that I worked for was a national company, but they didn't offer that role at the time. And so I just couldn't find it anywhere else. So I actually started to talk to a company that did something similar locally, and was having some conversations with them, and then just decided we're a little bit on different pages, so I'm going to start my own. So it was initially started as a product placement agency, placing brands into film and TV.
Right, because if somebody's watching, say, a movie on TV and one of the actors happens to be using an Apple computer, that's not there by mistake.
Exactly.
Apple paid for that.
100%. I mean, even soap operas, that's where the term soap comes from, is because it was sponsored by soap brands.
Really?
And yeah, yes, yeah, because the market was women at home, and these are
Yes.
the products they were using, right? So that's actually where the term soap opera comes from.
Mhm.
So lots of examples of it, and it's that industry has certainly evolved.
That's transitioned now, of course, to content creation and all the placement in social media.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it kind of makes me think of, I'm a big quote person, so I might keep using quotes, but
Please.
um, there's a quote that says the first one through the wall always gets bloodied,
Mm.
right? And I feel like in many cases I have been that person, because even back then, so this would have been in 2006, 7, when I was talking about product placement, people
Mhm.
didn't know what it was.
No.
No, they certainly didn't know what brand integration was. And brand integration was more like seamless integration of a product into a script. So not just would you say, hey, I've got an opportunity for a computer to be on the screen, but it would actually be in the script. So then that's brand integration. And then it turned into branded content. And, there's this whole industry that's been created. But I have certainly been at the point where I feel quite, maybe have felt beaten up, because you have to go through this explanation of, this is what product placement is, and this is why we're
Mhm.
not doing it for free. And, I get that 2 years ago, you would have just been told, send me a bunch of product and the film people will use it. And it's just not how
Right.
it works anymore. Nothing's for free.
It was there earlier than a lot of us suspected, because when it's done really well, you don't notice it. It's so well integrated.
Exactly. And you know what, Joan? That's actually why I got out of that industry. That's why I ended up moving on to other things, was because when I was a kid, I loved TV advertising. I always knew I would work in advertising on some level. When I was a teenager, I got very interested in wellness. So I'm glad I can combine the two now.
Mhm.
But the when I was a kid, I thought I would make TV commercials for Coke, like Coca-Cola.
Okay.
And I wanted to work for the agencies that did that. But then as I got older and I started this product placement agency, what I realized back then, at least, is that a lot of the brands that I wanted to support, like the healthy brands, they didn't have the budgets. It was the Coca-Colas of the world, the Frito-Lay, the chips, the chocolate, these, and I just, again, talk about moral compass, and no judgment against anyone who is putting Coca-Cola into film projects, but I just didn't feel right putting those brands onto the big screen, or even onto a small screen.
That would be totally incongruent with who you are.
Yeah.
And what was your company called?
It was, at that time, it was called Shift Brand Integration Group. And so Shift Big was the acronym. And it was all about shifting, and I still believe this, I still use the word, but shifting the way people think about advertising. And then eventually it was about shifting the way people think about wellness.
Tell us about the transition when you were working full time. You had started Shift while you
Hmm.
were still with radio.
Hmm.
And how long were you sticking around the corporate job while you were developing Shift?
That's a great question. I think probably I was really committed to getting out about 6 months before I actually left. I
Mhm.
think it was probably mentally, it was in my head longer than that.
Yes.
But I was was slowly walking towards the door for about 6 months. Yeah, I'd say 4 to 6 months.
Do you remember that moment when you actually walked out the door or told them that?
Oh, Joan, I so remember that moment because I my and some of the people, especially my sales manager at the time, would remember this too because I was excited to go,
Mhm.
but I just loved what I did. I loved the people that I worked with. So it wasn't a see you later kind of thing. It was like, oh my God, I don't want to leave and you guys are great and let's stay in touch. And I still do stay in touch with like many of them. But yeah, it was certainly the right decision, but it wasn't really it was an easy one, but it wasn't an easy one, if that makes sense.
Yes, in the sense that your heart just was not there anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when you jumped ship, how were you set up financially to be able to do that? Like, had you saved up money or you already had enough clients going that would sustain you?
I had saved up money, but if I was to give somebody a piece of advice that I wish I had been given
Mhm.
before I left and officially went out on my own, I would say go max out your line of credit while you've got a regular paycheck coming in, so that you are have a little bit of a safety net, right? I mean, I was lucky.
By that, you mean get approved for the
Yes,
highest, not
exactly,
max it out in terms of actually using it, but
exactly.
have those credit cards or lines of credit, whatever you can get for the best rate, they're waiting in the wings when you can qualify with that corporate job. That's excellent advice.
Exactly. I would never, I was lucky because at the time I had, I'd owned my place. I had a line of credit that they'd given me with my mortgage that I hadn't tapped into. And so I was lucky that way, but I certainly would tell other people to go out there and get approved for whatever you can.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully you won't have to use it, but at least you
Exactly.
know it's there if you need
At
it.
least you know it's there. Yeah.
When you left corporate and you were working shift, that's not what you were doing today. How did you jump from one to the next?
In the interim, I had some old clients of mine who were local who were asking, "Will you do my marketing?" And can you help me with this? Can you help me with that? And at that point, I thought, you know what? It's kind of refreshing to just ground myself again here and do something local. And so what ended up happening is I really honed in on local marketing for local businesses. And some of them were national, but for the most part, they were local. At least the head office was local. And
Mhm.
so then shift was less about product placement and more just about marketing. And if there was an opportunity to put them into a TV or film, we would look at that as part of their marketing strategy.
Right.
And so my passion for wellness and lifestyle brands was worked into that version of shift because it was more in line with what I wanted to promote and more in line with the target market that I was comfortable working with. And so we worked with like a coffee chain, a skincare product, an organic grocer, and whatnot. And then I decided, you know what? We're not going to do a bunch of marketing strategy. We're only going to do PR. So we're only going to do public relations because
Okay.
strategy is, I mean, it's huge, managing campaigns and branding and all of these things.
Mhm.
And so I eventually honed in even more to do PR only for wellness brands. And again, it was one of those things where you know when you make the right decision that
Mhm.
you just immediately you feel this like stress off your shoulders, and that's when you know that intuitively it was the right decision, right?
Yes.
And I
Yes.
remember that feeling. And I also remember the feeling saying, no, we're only doing PR for wellness brands because I used to teach sales and marketing classes and students would get very worked up about, oh, I don't want to go too narrow into a niche because then I feel like into a target market because then
Yes.
I feel like I'm excluding so many people. And, if I was going to give a piece of advice to somebody starting their own business or the side hustle or marketing to anybody, I'd say know your niche and stick to it. And you can't be all things to all people
Mhm.
because the more you try to do that, the more money you're going to spend.
Mhm.
Not many people have enough money in the world to, target everybody, even Apple.
Especially in this day and age too, where we've got the ability to connect with people, literally a global audience, global
Hmm.
customers. You can niche because you can reach out to the people that you need to, even if it's like super narrow.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So I had gotten to the point where it was PR and wellness. And then I was at a TV station with a client. And I should preface this by saying that when I moved into the city that I live in now,
Hmm.
in Vancouver, I came out here when I was 18 to go to school to study nutrition.
Okay.
And so has been nutrition and wellness overall has been a passion of mine since I was about 15. And so what I decided in this moment at this TV station, I was had we had secured an interview for a client at the time, and the interview was happening, and I was listening to the interview and thinking, this messaging is just not coming across the way it needs to come across. This is not educating people the way that it needs to be educated. And I said, okay, that's it. I'm going and I'm gonna do what I came out here to do way back in 1993, which
Wow.
is build this wellness brand. And
Wow.
so I ended up still having that marketing company, but I went back to school and I did another certification. And then as I was shutting down my marketing agency and going to school, I was starting Nicole Porter Wellness. So
Wow.
I had three things going on at that
Hmm.
time.
Right.
Like slowly closing one out, getting more educated on the nutrition wellness side, and then starting this business.
But you've got such a wealth of experience there
Oh,
because of all that you've done that you can bring to Nicole Porter Wellness. Now, I understand to go back to school, you actually changed your living arrangements in a big way.
I did. I sold my home.
That's
So
huge, Nicole.
and you know what, Joan, I understand. I do get that.
Hmm.
I get that that's huge. But even when I think about it now, it just was like, yeah, it's a no brainer. Like it was just
Okay.
something that I completely understand that it's a big deal. But and maybe I should pause more often and consider that it's a big deal. But it was just a necessary part of the process. And I remember even talking to my mortgage broker, and she said, "You look so excited. Like I can see the sparkle in your eyes." So,
Yeah,
there are other hustles I will have in my life, but what I do today is truly what I think I was meant to do.
what you were born to do, what you're
Yeah,
meant to do. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
When you know the decision is right, like you just said, it's a no-brainer. For someone like myself on the outside looking in, it's like, oh my gosh, she sold her home to do this.
right.
But in your mind, you probably had, no, let me rephrase that. Not in your mind, in your heart, you didn't have any other choice.
Exactly. I just wanted to be able to build this business without any hesitations about, how am I spending this? How am I spending that? I guess there's no better way to commit than selling your home.
I'm doing
I'd
this
have other
now.
places to live, but
Nice. I'm sure you did. You're smart. So, what's your main focus or focuses with Nicole Porter Wellness?
my main focus is stress coaching. That's what I call myself, as a stress coach and wellness educator. I'm a nutritionist. I used to teach aerobics back in the day. I was a personal trainer and teach Pilates and whatnot. But what I realized in my studies was that there are 10 habits that busy professionals tend to repeat on a pretty much daily basis, that all put stress on the body. And I refer to it as hidden stress. So
Wow.
they all put stress on the body in one way or another. And that is what keeps people not just from reaching their health and wellness goals, but from reaching optimal health and preventing disease. So, yes, I talk about nutrition. Yes, I talk about fitness, but I talk about 8 other habits as well. So I'm really about educating people about what hidden stress does to the body and mind.
So let me tap into then your expertise as a stress coach and wellness educator. Maybe a two-part question for you in regards to stress. So first of all of us feel stressed at times, but like, what's the consequence of feeling stressed out more often than not? What's the big deal?
What people usually don't understand is what is happening inside the body as a result of stress. So let's say that, and as I mentioned, I talk about hidden stress, but regardless of what stress your body is under, whether it is working too late on your side hustle and only getting 2 hours of sleep, or it is eating too much sugar, or it is working out even too much, it can impact your nervous system. Like your body responds to it the same way internally. So that stress can impact your nervous system. It can impact your hormones. It can reprioritize where the energy is going in your body, which means your immune system can suffer, your cognitive health can suffer, your digestive system, reproductive system, your bone health. All of these things can suffer when you're putting your body under stress. And stress is a lot perception too, right? I mean, when we're talking about mental and emotional stress.
Sure.
So let's say that you open up your email in the morning and you've got 100 emails unopened, and you could look at it and go, right on, I am excited to get started on the day and look at all these people. Whereas somebody else might go, this is too much, this is too much, this is too much. And immediately their stress response gets activated. So it is perception, but the common denominator between the typical stress we know about, like the example I just gave you, versus dehydration, for example, the
Okay.
common denominator is that it all involves how your brain perceives things. So, an example of hidden stress is dehydration. And dehydration starts in the brain. When you recognize that you're dehydrated, it starts in the brain. People might say, oh, it starts in my mouth because I feel like my mouth is dry and I'm thirsty, but it doesn't. It's your brain sensing that there's an imbalance in your body. So that's not one of the, it is sort of one of the 10 stressors. I combine it into poor nutrition because poor nutrition is a stressor.
So then it's the brain that triggers that reaction in the mouth?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's that's the short answer is that stress will impact your brain, impact your hormones, and then that is what can keep you from optimal health.
Yikes. Our side hustle heroes out there are giving it all they've got. They're either in the planning stages or they're already running their businesses, generating sales, putting out fires, facing a steep learning curve. So, with so many potential stressors out there, what are, let's say, 3 things that you'd recommend that we do to reduce our stress?
Did you say 3 or can I say 33?
Why
It's so hard for me to narrow it down. But if
do I
I
choose
think,
3?
yeah, so I think if I was going to give 3, then, oh, it is so hard to only give 3. But if I was going to give 3, I would probably say number 1, it would be to fuel your body properly because and that includes being properly hydrated. So, fueling your body properly, I'm talking about proper nutrition. And that's a huge, huge topic. A lot of people think they know what to eat. And when I dive a bit deeper, they're
Mhm.
really still making mistakes that people made 30 years ago. So we need to fuel our body properly with real food. And we need to stay properly hydrated. So I'm going to combine those two into one, because if
Sure.
I think about why did I have the energy to do what I did and work 100+ hours a week, many, many weeks,
Mhm.
then I think a main part of that is because I was fueling my body properly.
What do you think people are reaching for during the day in terms of that? I don't even want to call it fuel, but what are they reaching for during the day that they shouldn't be? That's really common.
Sugar, caffeine, and processed packaged goods,
Okay.
without a doubt.
Triple
And
play.
all of those things put nutritional stress on the body. Like when I think of, like an energy bar or something like that, I mean, there's a lot. Some are good, some are not. Some are
Right.
good, most are not.
Yes.
People need real food. That's like eat real food is like the simplest way I can sum up proper nutrition. But for sure, without a doubt, too much coffee, too much sugar, thinking that that's the way that your body gets energy, and it's not how the body works. It's not how you get energy.
Mhm. We both know how difficult it is to change those habits because they are habit patterns.
Hmm.
I guess somehow you've got to find a way to be able to capture someone's attention long enough to get them to try this out for a little while so that they can see the benefits of it.
Exactly. Yep.
Mm.
They do. It's like any habit.
If you were working with someone and you were guiding them as to say, for instance, what they should be reaching for, how long do you think it would be before they'd actually be able to feel a difference, to be able to go, oh my gosh, this is actually working. I should maybe keep doing this?
Someone who usually in my programs, if someone is starting to get properly hydrated, it'll take them about 3 weeks if they're following the program. But proper hydration, generally speaking, takes people about 3 to 4 weeks to notice.
So number one was that how we're fueling.
How we're fueling, and I would say that's why I had energy to do what I did. Now I'll tell you one that I made a huge mistake on, and what I would tell people to don't do what I did, and that is to prioritize sleep.
Mm, okay.
And I did not know how important sleep really was. And again, this could be a whole podcast on its own, but a lack of sleep is one of the stressors that I talk about. If you're not getting enough sleep, it's imbalancing hormones. It is putting your body into, basically it's like I talk about when you're stressed, it's like putting your foot on the gas. And when you're not stressed, it's like putting your foot on the brake. And we need to have our foot on the brake more often. And getting some sleep, even if it's little naps, even if it's doing mindful breathing and you're not actually sleeping. Those things, anything you can do to put your foot on the brake more often is going to be beneficial. It puts your body into what's called the relaxation response as opposed to the stress response. And that's where magic can really happen. And I certainly recall, nights where I didn't sleep or
Mm-hmm.
where I only got a couple hours of sleep because, I've got to get this project done or
Right.
whatever. But it has a huge impact on our health.
Especially for those people who are working the 9 to 5, or in most cases, 9 to 7 or whatever it is, and trying to build the side hustle, then it's okay, where do I fit in sleep? But I guess what you're saying, and I agree with you, is that if we need to cut back the amount of hours we're putting into that side hustle, we're still going to be further ahead because of the productivity when we're actually working it. Like, we're that much
Exactly.
more effective.
Exactly. You can't run your tank on empty for that long.
Hmm.
And I think people sort of have to, not sort of, people do have to trust that process that, okay, I'm going to shut down my work. Okay, I got home at 5:30. I had dinner. I put my kids down, however busy their lives are.
Sure.
And then I'm going to start my side hustle at 7 p.m. or 8 p.m. I've got to go to bed by 10 or 11 if I'm going to get up at 6. You
Right.
have to. You're
Hmm.
going to be so much more productive, and sleep impacts your cognitive health. Stress actually, and a lack of sleep is a stress. It can actually shrink a part of your brain responsible for memory. So, you want to recall things and be at the top of your game. You've
Hmm.
got to get sleep. Plus, it's the time for your body to repair and restore and all of these things.
And when there are times when, for whatever reason, that's just not going to happen, having that skill in your back pocket that you mentioned about even just dropping down into that relaxed state or
Mm-hmm.
meditative state is huge. And I've always seen that as a skill that someone can develop. We may not be great at it at first, but if we keep practicing it, we can get to the point where we can drop into that relaxed state very quickly. Would you agree with that?
I would fully agree with that. And with mindful breathing, that is one of the hardest habits for people to build. People actually have an easier time cutting out sugar than they do sitting down and being still. And I've seen this for years in my programs. And
Wow.
it truly, like they think, I can never cut out sugar or caffeine or whatever it is. And then when we get to the mindful breathing module, it's a whole other ballgame. Like it makes people uncomfortable. It makes people feel vulnerable, but it's a skill, just tie in wine, because of course I'll tie in wine. Uh, but
Sure, let's
it's
do that.
exactly, it's like you can also learn to be better at appreciating wine. Like a wine expert, a sommelier, or somebody who's a master of wine could,
Mhm.
swirl their glass and say, "Oh, this is from this region," and or I can taste this or smell this in the wine. I can smell berries or tar or earth or whatever it is, and other
Yep.
people might look back and look over and say, "I can't believe that you can do that." Like,
Mhm.
you must have just been born with that skill. And yeah, sure, many people are born with skills, but you can also learn that too.
Yes.
So you can learn to be still. And we don't
Mhm.
need to be perfect at it. Like a minute is better than nothing.
So now we're on to number 3?
So number three, Number three, it's so hard for me to
Okay, we
only
can do
give you
3 and 4.
three and four. Okay. So I would say that if I really only had to pick number three, then I would say to listen to your gut and to not doubt the direction that you're going, to stay, to not let yourself and your overthinking brain and perhaps your doubting brain get in the way of what you initially set out to accomplish in your side hustle. So if you had at some point the inspiration to start a side hustle and you're passionate about it, then try as much as you can to just stick with that moment, like remember that moment and let that be the motivator for you instead of letting, the doubt's going to happen. I mean, we all have that. Oh, is this worth it? Is this such a risk? And, I messed up. Like, you're going to make mistakes every day. You're going to learn a million things every day. But I would say that no one will ever regret following their gut and listening to their intuition. And I truly believe that. So I think that is, like, I talk about intuition in my programs because I believe that when people don't follow their gut, it can
Mhm.
become a source of stress. And so
Yeah.
I would just encourage people to just stay true to what your body and your gut is telling you.
Yeah, because there's that disconnect between what your heart's telling you to move towards and what you're physically doing during the day. I
Exactly.
could see that being a source of stress.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm,
And
right.
that, like, I think it's natural to start out in a side hustle or start another job or project or whatever, and maybe feel some doubt around what or am I good at this, or there are people out there who are better at this than me.
Mhm.
But as much as possible, just try to stay out of your head and trust the process.
Excellent advice. You've got such a wealth of knowledge and expertise in your background as far as marketing, advertising. How are clients finding out about you? What's been working for you from that marketing advertising standpoint?
People have been finding out about me a lot through my website, and they are just finding me online when they're doing searches. And I haven't even made any real concerted effort on SEO or SEM or AdWords or anything like that. I can attribute probably a lot of that, though, to the fact that, which could tie into another piece of advice, but the fact that I have always wanted, things just need to be perfect, right?
Mm,
So I was
mhm.
constantly making tweaks to my website. And the
Yes.
more you make tweaks to your website, the more Google is sort of poked at, and Google recognizes the website. So I was, over the years, have changed my messaging. I've changed how I've used copy on the website. So I think a lot of that is attributed to me making consistent tweaks to the website. My message in there, though, to somebody is like, quite often, done is better than perfect.
Mhm.
Like, so let's not, again, just don't get in your own way of making things happen. And then a lot of referral too,
Nice.
which is nice. It feels good.
Mhm. What percentage today are you doing online seminars versus standing in front of a live audience like you would have been doing before?
I have not done an in-person event since 2 days before we were officially in COVID.
Wow.
This is a great thing. People ask me how COVID affected my business, and I always say it didn't change how I do business. It changed how people do business with me. And so, as a result of COVID, I mean, I've got clients in Texas and Baltimore and Seattle, and they're all over the place. And it's a wonderful thing. Yes, it helps my business, but it also means that this information is accessible to more and more people. And
Mhm. Yeah.
and there's lots of experts out there, of course, but I love that the information can get out there no matter where you live.
I was a road warrior for a couple of decades anyway, constantly on
Hmm.
the road from flying from city to city. So if I was doing a seminar, say in Baltimore, which I did, I couldn't do one in Toronto until the next day. Whereas where
Exactly.
you're at now, you could do both of those before lunch if you wanted to.
Exactly. I know. I love it. I really do love it. Yeah.
That's fantastic. Not long ago, you told me about some eggnog that you were making from scratch and selling as a fundraiser. And I remember asking you if I could freeze it because I wasn't a huge fan of eggnog. I mean, I could drink maybe half a glass of the store-bought stuff, and you looked at me kind of funny, like, you don't seriously think you'll have leftovers. And I thought for sure I would. That is until I tasted it. Oh my God, Nicole, it was so good. It tastes nothing like that thick store-bought concoction. Not only did I not have leftovers, but I placed a second order. How did you come to making eggnog of all things? And do you think it could be a future for-profit side hustle?
I'm trying to contain my laughter while you're talking because I'm remembering that moment when we were sitting down. So, how did I get into making eggnog? My cousin used to make eggnog when I was little, and she's a phenomenal cook. And I just loved it. I
Mm.
absolutely love the eggnog, and she made it all from scratch. Back then there really wasn't store bought eggnog. I sound like I'm so old when I'm saying that, but it was completely natural. Now, was it completely healthy? No. And so over the years, I have played around with different recipes, and I've always made this natural eggnog. But last year, I decided that I was going to sell it and give the proceeds to a company that's based in Vancouver called Backpack Buddies, which helps kids basically make sure that kids have lunches Monday to Sunday, even when they're not at school. And so, yes, absolutely, this could be a for-profit side hustle. I would still have a percentage of sales going to Backpack Buddies to fuel these kids. But I love it. And I loved reactions like yours because I remember you saying that you wanted to freeze it or asking about it. And then I think it was the same day that you put in the next order.
Just downed it. And I remember sitting with you and a friend, and there was another friend that was skeptical as well. And I'm like, seriously, don't doubt, just buy it. I will buy it for you. You got to
Yeah,
try this stuff.
no,
It,
exactly.
it tasted to me though like there's some kind of a secret ingredient in there. Is there?
No,
Really?
no, actually, I mean, I should say yes, I guess, but
No, okay.
there
There's
really isn't. I think that perhaps that is just the result of eating or drinking something that's naturally occurring. Because
yes.
when you have something that's natural as opposed to something that's packaged, the natural food tastes quite different, unfortunately, for many people. I know you're a healthy eater, but we're so used to that store-bought eggnog that, maybe just a natural eggnog tastes like there's a secret ingredient.
So I grew up in Toronto and I was just used to eating supermarket store bought vegetables. For example, a bag of carrots. So that's to
Hmm.
me how carrots tasted. So then fast forward a whole bunch of years and I've got an organic garden happening, my first one. And I remember one of the first carrots I pulled out of the ground, my business partner's father was standing there and I tried it and I said, "You know what, John? Will you try one of these for me? It tastes funny." And he took a bite out of it and a big smile comes on his face. And he said, "Joan, that's how carrots are supposed to taste."
Exactly.
But it was such a different flavor right out of the ground versus in a bag for who knows how long.
So different. So
Mhm.
different.
So, what's the best way for our listeners to connect with you, Nicole?
Probably the easiest way is to go to my website, nicoleporterwellness.com. And then I'm on Instagram and LinkedIn and Facebook and all of those other YouTube and all of those other places. But nicoleporterwellness.com is probably the best place.
Terrific. And we'll make sure that that is in the show notes.
Excellent.
Thank you so very much, Nicole, for sharing your wellness wisdom, your stress education, your inspiration, and for being today's side hustle hero.
Thanks so much for having me, Joan. It was great to talk to you.
Before you go, here are 3 key takeaways. Honestly, it was a bit of a challenge for me to choose just 3. Nicole said, sometimes done is better than perfect. I totally agree. But I needed that reminder. You see, I'm a recovering perfectionist. I admit that. So, yeah, I still need to be reminded from time to time. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not talking about lowering your standards. I have very high standards, but we've got to know when okay is good enough. If you're a brain surgeon and you're in the operating room, you need to deliver perfection. But the next day, if you're creating an Instagram post and the font isn't quite right and you're short of time, good is probably just fine. What I've learned over the years is when I should temper my perfectionist tendency and when it's wise to let it run wild and not settle for anything less. So if you're a perfectionist, notice when you're doing it. Be the conscious observer of your actions, although there's probably people around you in your world who will remind you of when you're doing it. But practice reining it in when that's the wisest choice. Nicole and I also talked about the value of being trained in sales. You need to be able to hear the word no and move forward anyway. Hearing multiple no's is part of the sales process. If this is difficult for you and the word no shuts you down, I highly recommend the book Go for No, subtitled Yes is the Destination, No is How You Get There. It's a short but impactful 74-page read. This brings me to the key takeaway I want to elaborate on. Nicole mentioned that mental and emotional stress is about perception. She used the example of someone opening up their computer in the morning and seeing 100 new emails. One person is thrilled, wow, this is amazing. And the other person is, oh no, I can't handle this. Two people seeing the same situation, but perceiving it quite differently. I remember a time when I was helping on a commercial for Wrigley's Gum. One of the shooting locations was high up in the mountains in a remote area of British Columbia. The only way to get the actors and the reps from the advertising agency and from Wrigley's up there was to helicopter them in. Now, most of these people lived in big cities and they had never been in the mountains like this before. Well, during one of the trips into the location, the chopper pilot looked down to his left and he could see and pointed out to all the passengers a mama grizzly bear and her two cubs sauntering up the side of the mountain. The people were in awe of what they were seeing. I mean, here was a scene out of National Geographic right before their eyes. Well, I should say not all of them were excited about this in a positive way. There was one person who did not see the beauty of the moment, but rather they saw potential horror. By the time the chopper landed on location, this person was convinced that a pack of grizzlies, yes, a pack, was going to come down the mountain and eat everyone. Now, there was no point in trying to explain to this person that grizzlies don't pack. And with all the lights, camera, action going on, a grizzly would be far, far away. So again, same situation, but very different perceptions. For some people, being stuck in traffic can be a major stressor. For others, realizing that it's something beyond their control, they'll listen to something uplifting or educational, or just use the time to chill before wherever they're going to next. So the next time you feel stressed out about something, here's a tip. Challenge your thinking about the situation. What thoughts are going through your mind, and what's a better, healthier, more positive and productive way to view the situation? Maybe, just maybe, it's an opportunity in disguise. Well, that's a wrap for today. You'll find the links we mentioned and the show notes on our website, sidehustleheropodcast.com. And I'd love to hear your feedback on the show, on the guests, how this podcast is helping you. What areas could we do better? Shoot me an email message to hello@joanposivy.com or by DM on Instagram @joanposivy. Thanks for listening and hustle on.